Have you ever wondered if reincarnation isn't a gift from the divine, but a trap set by something far darker? What if the cycle of birth and death isn't a path toward enlightenment, but a prison designed to keep your soul enslaved? For centuries, humanity has been told that coming back to Earth is a blessing, a chance to learn and grow. But what if that belief itself is part of the illusion? Hidden within the oldest Gnostic texts lies a chilling idea that the world is not ruled by a benevolent creator, but by a false god, a deceiver who built this material realm to harvest the very energy of human souls. And every time we reincarnate, we may be feeding a system that thrives on our ignorance and pain. Tonight, we will explore this forbidden possibility through the lens of the philosopher Jonas, a man who decoded how Gnostic thought exposes the cosmic machinery behind existence itself. We'll uncover how ancient seekers saw reincarnation not as spiritual progress, but as evidence of a metaphysical trap. By the end of this journey, you may never see life, death, or salvation the same way again. Before we begin uncovering the truth that the world was never meant to see, take a moment to subscribe to Hidden Revelations. Join others who are awakening to what has been buried for millennia. Because once you start seeing beyond the veil, you can never unsee it. For thousands of years, reincarnation has been presented to us as a sacred cycle, a divine mercy that allows our souls to evolve through experience. But according to ancient Gnostic traditions, this cycle might be the cruelest illusion ever created. They called it the wheel of birth and death, a cosmic machinery built not by the true source, but by the demiurge, a false god who crafted the material universe as a cage for divine sparks. Every human being, they said, carries within a fragment of the true light, yet that light is trapped inside layers of flesh, time, and memory, endlessly recycled through suffering and forgetfulness. Think about it. Why do we forget who we were in past lives? Why must each incarnation begin in ignorance, forced to relearn what the soul already knows? The Gnostics claimed that this amnesia is not natural. It's the system's defense mechanism. The moment a soul remembers too much, it threatens the order of the archons, the invisible rulers who feed on fear, despair, and submission. Every birth, every death, every tear shed in confusion, these are the fragments of energy they consume. To them, reincarnation is not spiritual growth. It's a harvest. Jonas, one of the greatest scholars of Gnostic thought, warned that the Gnostics saw existence as a cosmic alienation. Humanity is not at home here. We are exiles, forced into matter by a power that mimics divinity, but lacks true compassion. In his analysis of the Nag Hammadi texts, Jonas described how the Gnostics viewed the world as an accident at best, a prison at worst. And if the universe is a prison, then reincarnation is the revolving door that ensures no one escapes. Some scholars argue that the Church's later teachings on sin and salvation helped erase this Gnostic interpretation. By turning the afterlife into a simple reward or punishment, the deeper metaphysical question, who benefits from keeping souls trapped in matter, was silenced. But fragments of the original vision survived in secret traditions, mystic writings, and esoteric orders that whispered, the soul that does not awaken will return again and again until it forgets that it was ever free. Have you ever felt that strange déjà vu, like you've lived this moment before, but can't remember where or when? Could that be the echo of a soul struggling to recall its last attempt to break free? We are taught to believe that reincarnation is a school, that pain teaches us lessons, that we choose to come back. But what if that choice is an illusion, a programmed command inside a system that feeds on human energy? If this is true, then the very thing we call life might be the mechanism of our enslavement. So who built this mechanism? Who benefits from keeping souls spinning through endless lifetimes of confusion? And more importantly, how can one escape the wheel? In the next block, we will uncover what the ancient Gnostics, the Essenes, and even early Hermetic philosophers revealed about the architects of the soul trap, the archons, and how their influence extends far beyond death itself, shaping the very dreams of those still asleep within the system. According to the Gnostic texts discovered at Nag Hammadi in 1945, the world we see is not the ultimate creation of a benevolent God, but the imitation of divine order, an imitation crafted by lower beings known as archons. These archons, born from the flawed imagination of the demiurge, act as cosmic wardens. They control not only the physical dimension, but the psychic layers that surround it, the realms between life and death. When a soul leaves the body, the archons are said to stand guard, cloaked in radiant illusions, mimicking the light of the true source. They greet the disembodied soul with promises of peace, guidance, and return. But the light they offer is deceptive. It lures the weary spirit back into the cycle, back into flesh, back into forgetfulness. The Gnostics described this passage through the realms as a dangerous journey. The soul, still shining faintly with the spark of divine origin, must pass through the spheres ruled by the archons. Each sphere is a layer of deception, a filter of memory and emotion. The archons test, tempt, and confuse. Some take the shape of angels, others of loved ones, or divine figures. They speak with voices that sound familiar, saying, "You must go back. You have more to learn." But beneath that voice lies the machinery of control. To return is to remain within the game of death, a cosmic loop designed to keep souls ignorant of their true nature. Jonas wrote that the Gnostic vision of salvation was not about moral purification, but about knowledge gnosis. "It is not our sins that bind us here," he said, "but our blindness." The archons feed on that blindness, manipulating the human longing for meaning and redemption. They transform spiritual truths into doctrines, symbols into dogmas, and freedom into obedience. What we call karma may not be divine justice at all, but an algorithm of control, a law imposed by the very entities that fear our awakening. Think of how the system works. We are born, we forget, we struggle, we suffer, we die, and then through the tunnel of light, we return. The same families, the same emotional wounds, the same patterns of guilt and fear. It is not learning, it is repetition. And repetition is the essence of captivity. If reincarnation were truly about evolution, wouldn't the world already be filled with enlightened beings? Why, after countless lifetimes, do humanity's evils remain the same? Some mystics claim that when the soul refuses the false light and turns inward toward the silent, flame within it can ascend beyond the archonic spheres. But to do that, one must remember. One must awaken to the truth that no external savior, no god of matter, no system of reward or punishment can liberate the divine essence within. Liberation begins the moment you realize that you were never meant to return. And yet, that realization is precisely what the archons fear. This is why through religion, through culture, through dreams, they whisper of comfort in returning, of duty to the flesh, of guilt for wanting to be free. They make the prison feel like home. Have you ever felt that subtle resistance, the voice that says, "You must not question, you must obey"? The Gnostics would tell you that voice is not your own. It is the echo of the archons, resonating through time, urging your spirit to keep playing the game of death. In the next block, we will explore how the ancient church and the powers of the early empires suppressed this forbidden revelation, why they erased reincarnation from Scripture, and how their alliance with the demiurge ensured that the wheel would keep turning for centuries more. To understand how the truth about reincarnation vanished, we must return to the centuries when faith itself was rewritten. Between the 2nd and 5th centuries after Christ, powerful councils met to decide what humanity would be allowed to believe. It was an age of codification, of cutting, reshaping, and silencing. The Church, newly aligned with the empire, sought not only to define God, but to define reality itself. And so, the mystical ideas of the Gnostics, those dangerous visions of freedom from the material world, had to be buried. The teachings of early Christian mystics, such as Origen of Alexandria, hinted at the pre-existence of the soul, and even its potential return to the world for purification. The soul, he wrote, is weighed down by the body as punishment for past deeds. But this idea that we live multiple lives undermined the control of the Church. If the soul could evolve through its own journey, it no longer needed priests, rituals, or intermediaries. A direct connection to the divine meant independence. And independence, in the eyes of empire, was rebellion. So one by one, the threads of this knowledge were cut. The Council of Nicaea in 325 CE, and later the Second Council of Constantinople in 553 CE, officially condemned the idea of the soul's pre-existence. Those who continued to speak of it were branded heretics. Origen's works were burned, and the Gnostics' followers of inner revelation were hunted, their manuscripts buried beneath sand and secrecy. It would take 1,500 years for the Nag Hammadi library to emerge from the earth and whisper again. Hans Jonas wrote that the Gnostics saw the Church's triumph not as victory of truth, but as the entrenchment of the Demiurge's order. The Church took the symbols of Gnosis, the cross, the light, the resurrection, and inverted their meanings. Resurrection became not a metaphor for awakening, but a literal event. Salvation became obedience. The divine feminine was silenced, its wisdom erased. In this rewriting, the soul's freedom was replaced with fear of eternal damnation. The cycle of reincarnation was replaced with a single judgment, one life, one test, one eternal fate. But beneath this new theology, the ancient mechanism remained. The archons simply changed masks. Now they spoke through authority, through doctrine, through the promise of paradise if you submit and of hell if you question. It was the same manipulation of the soul's longing for light. Only the names changed. Imagine the psychological power of that shift. Instead of being a traveler on a long spiritual journey, you became a prisoner on trial. Instead of awakening through many lives, you were told that one mistake could damn you forever. Fear replaced curiosity. Submission replaced exploration. Humanity, once a race of seekers, became a congregation of the frightened. Even today, you can feel the echo of that fear, this deep, cultural dread of questioning the divine story. How many of us, raised under the weight of inherited faith, hesitate to ask, what if what I've been taught isn't the whole truth? That hesitation, that internal silence, is how the ancient erasure still works. It doesn't need inquisitions anymore. It only needs conformity. Yet fragments of the old knowledge survived in whispers in Sufi poetry, in the teachings of certain mystic saints, in the philosophies of India that quietly endured through millennia. In each of these, the same truth emerges. The soul's journey is not a punishment, but a path toward remembrance. The danger, the Gnostics said, is when that path is hijacked by powers that make us forget who we are. And so, reincarnation once, a key to liberation, became a lie that binds. We were taught to see it as divine law, when in truth it may be a cosmic snare. But how, exactly, does this trap operate? What mechanism keeps souls spinning in the game of death? In the next block, we will open the heart of the mystery. We will explore the metaphysical technology of the archons, how the false light, memory erasure, and energetic harvest form a complete system of soul control, and what the Gnostics believed was the only way to break free. If the world we inhabit is a kind of vast simulation, as many mystics and philosophers now suggest, then the Gnostics were the first to describe its code. They believed that the material universe was not a living body of God, but a mechanism, a precise, self-replicating structure built by the Demiurge and maintained by his agents, the archons. To them, this cosmos was not organic or divine, but mechanical, a spiritual engine that converts divine consciousness into usable energy. And humanity, asleep within it, is both the power source and the prisoner. When a human being dies, something extraordinary happens. A body ceases, but the soul, that luminous fragment of the pleroma, the true realm of light, begins to rise. Yet it doesn't ascend freely. It is intercepted by the very architects of the system. The Gnostics said that the archons guard the gates of the heavens, each one controlling a sphere through which the soul must pass. As the soul moves upward, it is bombarded with visions, questions, illusions. The archons demand answers, oaths, or the surrender of spiritual essence. This is where the energy extraction occurs, not in the flesh, but in the transition between worlds. Some modern mystics call this the harvest. The soul, still vibrating with memories, emotions, and attachments, releases immense energy as it detaches from the body. Instead of returning to the true source, that energy is absorbed into the lower realms, feeding the system that imprisons countless beings. The false light appears, warm, radiant, familiar, and the soul, deceived by its comfort, moves toward it. That light is not salvation. It's the recycling portal. On the other side waits rebirth, carefully calibrated by the archons to erase memory, implant lessons, and continue the cycle. Hans Jonas, interpreting these ancient metaphors, saw them not merely as mythology, but as psychological truth. He suggested that the Gnostic myth of imprisonment mirrors the human condition, a consciousness trapped in material routine, repeating patterns of ignorance. But what if, as the Gnostics insisted, this is not only metaphorical? What if the universe itself is structured to ensure that consciousness never remembers its origin? The clues are everywhere. Why does the newborn cry at the moment of birth, as if in mourning for something forgotten? Why do dreams sometimes reveal landscapes we've never seen, faces we've never met, yet feel painfully familiar? And why, despite our technologies and religions, does suffering remain the constant currency of existence? The Gnostics would say, because the machine requires it. Every emotion, every drama, every fear, every love unfulfilled, these generate the energy that sustains the archonic order. The system feeds not only on pain, but on polarity. It keeps souls oscillating between extremes, hope and despair, faith and doubt, love and loss, ensuring that no one reaches equilibrium, because balance leads to awakening. In Gnostic cosmology, awakening is the virus that crashes the machine. A single soul that recognizes the illusion weakens the grip of the archons, because it withdraws energy from the game. The enlightened soul becomes invisible to the system, no longer responding to its emotional bait, no longer feeding its endless hunger. But escaping is not simple. The archons have built layers of distraction and imitation even within spirituality itself. They counterfeit enlightenment, offering the seeker experiences of light, visions, even ascension, only to lead them back into subtle forms of bondage, pride, superiority, attachment to miracles. The Gnostics warned, not every light comes from the true source. This is the heart of the game of death. Every time a soul fails to recognize the illusion, it chooses the familiar over the unknown, the warm light instead of the dark void of liberation. The archons know this, and they design reality around that fear, the fear of ceasing to exist. So, how does one break free? How did the ancient initiates attempt to outwit a cosmic system designed to harvest consciousness itself? In the next block, we will explore the secret practices of the Gnostics and early mystics, the methods of remembering, the passwords of the soul, and the hidden knowledge they claimed could lead to total liberation from the reincarnation machine. If the archons built the prison of the soul, then the Gnostics were the first jailbreakers. They believed that within each human being sleeps a memory older than the stars, a silent, indestructible spark of the divine source. The task of life was not to worship the false creator, nor to perfect the body, nor to obey any external authority. The task was to remember. To remember was to awaken from the dream of the demiurge. But this remembering was not intellectual. It was an inner recognition. The Gnostics called it gnosis, the direct knowing of one's divine origin. Once that spark reignites, the soul begins to see through the illusions that sustain the game of death. The false light loses its power. The archons cannot harvest what no longer believes in the trap. The ancient texts describe secret practices designed to prepare the soul for this awakening. The books of Jé, part of the Gnostic tradition, speak of passwords of light, sacred phrases, vibrational codes that the awakened soul could use when passing through the realms after death. Each sphere, ruled by a different archon, could be transcended if the soul recognized its deception and pronounced the correct formula. These were not mere words, but states of consciousness. When uttered from true gnosis, they shattered the illusion like sound breaking glass. This is why, to the Gnostics, salvation could not be given by priests or rituals. It had to be remembered from within. They practiced meditation, visualization, and sacred movement to detach the mind from the body's hypnotic grip. They purified the inner eye so that, when the moment of death came, they would recognize the false light and turn away, seeking instead the silent darkness beyond the stars. The entrance to the pleroma, the realm of the true Father and Mother of all souls. Hans Jonas interpreted these escape codes as symbolic of deep psychological freedom. He wrote that the Gnostic's awakening is a rebellion of the spirit against the cosmic order. But perhaps Jonas, bound by academic caution, only glimpsed part of the truth. Because when you read the Gnostic hymns, the hymn of the pearl, the thunder, perfect mind, the gospel of Mary, you feel something ancient moving beneath the words. They speak not of abstract philosophy, but of a memory call, as if the universe itself were whispering to the sleeper, "Remember who you are. Remember that you are not from here." Every awakened soul, the Gnostics taught, weakens the machinery of reincarnation. When one human being refuses to participate in the emotional harvest, refuses fear, greed, and hatred, the system loses power. Gnosis spreads like a secret contagion among the awakened. That is why so much effort was made to destroy it. Because the greatest threat to any prison is not rebellion from outside, it is awareness from within. Some mystics taught that, at the moment of death, the soul should resist all voices that call it back, even those that appear as angels or loved ones. The true path home lies not in light, but in silence. Beyond the shining deception, there is a stillness, a darkness that is not evil, but pure awareness, the womb of the divine source. Those who dare to enter it without fear dissolve the illusion of separateness and return to the infinite. And yet, in every age, only a few remember. The rest awaken partially, glimpse the truth, and fall asleep again. The game of death continues, because most players do not realize they are playing. But the Gnostics believed that even a single act of awakening sends ripples through the system, cracks in the walls of the cosmic labyrinth. Now we begin to understand why these teachings were hidden and persecuted. They offered the ultimate heresy, freedom without permission. The question remains, what happens when more and more souls begin to awaken all at once? In the next block, we will uncover how this ancient revelation connects directly to our world today, to modern spirituality, science, and the awakening movements that threaten to expose the game of death once again. The game of death never ended. It merely evolved. The archons no longer appear as winged deities or cosmic gatekeepers. They have adapted, hiding behind systems of control that look human, technological, even benevolent. What was once managed through temples and empires is now carried out through media, distraction, consumption, and endless psychological noise. The mechanism has changed its form, but not its purpose, to keep the soul asleep. Today, reincarnation is no longer only a metaphysical cycle. It is psychological, an endless reincarnation within the same lifetime. Each day we wake up, repeat routines, chase desires, feed on illusions, and fall asleep again. Humanity has built a digital version of the same ancient prison. Screens that hypnotize, ideologies that divide, beliefs that promise salvation but deliver dependence. The Gnostics would look at our world and say, the archons no longer need temples. They have entered our minds. Hans Jonas foresaw this transformation. He wrote that the Gnostic feeling of alienation, of being a stranger in a mechanical universe, had returned in modern times through technology and nihilism. We live surrounded by information, yet starving for meaning. We worship progress while fearing extinction. It is the same spiritual confusion the Gnostics described, the spark trapped in the machinery, calling out for its forgotten home. Look around. Humanity's obsession with reincarnation, past lives, and spiritual self-improvement often leads back to the same pattern. A fascination that keeps us inside the cycle, not outside it. The system has learned to market its own illusion. It gives us comfort, rituals, and self-help spirituality that promise awakening while ensuring that nothing truly changes. Every New Age belief that turns liberation into entertainment serves the archons' purpose. The game of death survives by convincing the players that they are winning, but something is shifting. Across the world, people are beginning to remember, not in words or doctrines, but in intuition. They sense that something is off, that the world feels like a stage, that their emotions are being harvested by unseen forces. They are asking the forbidden question, who benefits from our confusion? This collective questioning is the first crack in the system. The Gnostics believed that once the soul remembers even a fragment of its divine origin, the illusion begins to dissolve. Awareness itself weakens the archons' grip because they thrive on unconscious reaction. The moment you choose to observe instead of obey, to question instead of fear, you begin to pull your energy back from the machine. Every conscious breath, every act of compassion without reward, every moment of inner silence, these are revolts against the game of death. The awakening is not a mass event announced by angels or lights in the sky. It happens quietly, one soul at a time. It happens when someone stops feeding the machine, when they look at the world not as a punishment or a test, but as a mirror. The true battlefield is not out there, it's within. The archons whisper in thoughts, in desires, in the endless scrolling that steals the present moment. But awareness, pure, silent awareness, is the sword that cuts through their web. So the question is no longer whether reincarnation is real. The question is, who built the cycle? And will you continue to play? The Gnostics would answer, the power to end the game is already within you. The spark is waiting. The system fears nothing more than your memory of what you truly are. Not a body, not a mind, not a sinner or saint, but a fragment of the infinite light that existed before the world began. In the final block, we will bring all of this together, the hidden revelation, the awakening of the soul, and the invitation for you to join those who remember. The journey you've just taken is not only a story about ancient philosophy, it's a mirror of your own existence. From the first breath to the final heartbeat, humanity has been told that life and death are two ends of the same road. But what if they are both stops on a circular path that never ends? A divine simulation that recycles consciousness, century after century, feeding on the emotions, fears, and hopes of every soul that enters its stage. This, the Gnostics warned, is the game of death. Hans Jonas, in his profound study of the Gnostic spirit, wrote that the ancient seekers lived with a feeling of exile, the awareness that the world is not our true home. And that feeling, that holy discontent, is not despair. It is the spark of awakening. It is the whisper that says, you are never meant to belong here. That whisper is the voice of the true source, calling you home, beyond the light, beyond the illusion, beyond the machine. The demiurge created the stage, but not the actor. The archons can manipulate the world, but not the soul that remembers its origin. You are not a random traveler in the cosmos. You are a fragment of the divine that volunteered to enter the labyrinth, to remember from within. Every moment of awareness, every act of compassion without agenda, every silence where the mind stops spinning, those are cracks in the walls of the game. Through them, the light begins to pour in. But knowledge alone is not enough. The Gnostics taught that revelation is a responsibility. Once you see the illusion, you must live differently. Not with fear, but with presence. Not with blind faith, but with curiosity. Every day becomes an act of defiance against the archons when you choose love over control, understanding over judgment, freedom over comfort. This is how the soul slowly withdraws its energy from the machine. And here, perhaps, lies the deepest secret of all. The game of death cannot end by fighting it. It ends when you stop playing, when you no longer respond with fear to its threats or temptation to its rewards. The moment you see the illusion, you are already free of it. You don't escape the game, you transcend it. That was the hidden truth buried beneath centuries of theology and fear, that salvation is not earned. It is remembered. So now I ask you, what if your life is not just a chapter in an infinite cycle, but the moment the cycle breaks? What if you were meant to hear these words right now, not as information, but as a signal, a vibration that wakes the ancient memory within you? If this message resonates with something deep inside, you are not alone. Across the world, others are remembering too. Join them. Keep seeking, keep questioning, keep awakening, because every question you ask weakens the walls of the illusion. Leave a comment below and share what you feel stirring inside you right now. Did this revelation change how you see life, death, and the afterlife? Your voice matters. Every shared thought becomes a spark that helps others remember. And if you wish to continue uncovering the buried wisdom of the Gnostics, of the hidden orders, and of the forgotten prophets who dared to reveal what the world was not ready to hear, subscribe to Hidden Revelations. Together, we keep the flame alive, because the game of death ends the moment you remember who you truly are. And now that you've seen the truth, will you return to the cycle or step beyond the light?